We are live, Chairman.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this North Western Area Planning Committee meeting on Wednesday the 13th of January. My name is Councillor Mrs Maddie Thompson. I'm the chairman of this committee. I will at this point just mention that I spent the afternoon in the dentist's chair, so if I fall over my teeth, I'm afraid there's a reason for that. My face is a bit numb still. Right, to continue, this meeting is held under regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There are just a few housekeeping issues to run through. First of all, please could I ask everyone in the meeting to make sure your microphone remains muted when you're not addressing the committee to reduce background noises and avoid any unintentional disturbances. The meeting is going to be hosted remotely via conferencing software, which allows members of the public to virtually attend the meeting while being able to protect themselves and others and observe the current lockdown measures. We are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please use the hands up function of the meeting to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Members are reminded that apart from points of order or indicating that you must leave the meeting, the chat function should not be used for questions or any other purpose. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please ensure you reference a page or paragraph number and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. When invited to speak, please ensure you turn on your microphone and video if possible. Right, now may I ask officers taking part in the meeting to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Lee.
Good evening, members. I'm Matthew Lee and I'm Lead Specialist Place and Chief Planning Officer at Malden District Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Michael Johnson, Lead Specialist Development Management. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence. You're muted, Mr. Lawrence. Can you unmute, please?
Yeah,
I
can.
You.
Good evening, members. Sorry about the delay. I'm the Interim Development Management Team Leader.
Thank you. And Miss Keane, Annie Keane?
Good evening, members. I'm Annie Keane, Senior Caseworker, Development Management.
Thank you. And Ms. Parker-Haynes.
Good evening, members. I'm Hayley Parker-Haynes and I'm a Senior Caseworker in Development Management.
Thank you. And Ms. Bowles? Do we have Ms. Bowles, Hannah Bowles?
Oh, I think I was muted, sorry. Good evening, my name's Wells and I'm a specialist in development management. Thank you.
I have Sophie Marden on my list, but I believe she's not here. Is that right? Could someone confirm?
That's correct. She's not here today.
Thank you. And last but not least, committee clerk Katie.
Good evening, members. My name's Katie Fuller. I'm clerk to this evening's committee.
Thank you. Before I call on the clerk to take the roll call of committee members, can I please ask those councillors in attendance to introduce themselves? Is there anyone? We're not doing this the normal way round, but so if there is anyone who's attending out of interest and not as a member of this particular committee, could you possibly speak now?
It's Chrissy Morris in the place.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Right, I think you're the only one, so let's move on to the roll call. Katie, could you carry out the roll call of members to confirm members of the committee in attendance?
Yes, Chairman. Members, I'll call your name in alphabetical order. Please could you indicate if you are present, starting with Councillor Durham.
Present, thank you.
Good evening. Councillor Mrs Fleming.
Here, thanks, Katie.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Evening, Katie, councillors.
Good evening. Councillor Keys.
Good evening, Katie. Chairman and councillors, I'm present.
Good Good evening. Councillor Morley.
Good evening, Katie. Present.
Good evening. Councillor Siddle.
Good evening, Katie. Present.
Good evening. Councillor Mrs. Thompson, you're here?
Oh, definitely. Thank you.
Councillor Miss White.
Good evening, Katie and members. I'm present.
Good evening. Thank you. Councillor Thompson, we have a full house.
Thank you very much. Members, please be advised that we have 5 public participants in the meeting today, and I will be asking them to speak, of course, at the appropriate time. But they are in the meeting until we get to their spot. Apologies for absence. We have none, I take it, Katie?
No, we have none.
Okay, thank you. So item 3 on our agenda is recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on 16th of December, found on pages 7 to 16, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move. If you wish to second that motion, please unmute your microphone and state your name now.
Great.
Okay, I think I got Councillor Durham first, but anyone is fine. If any member wishes to raise any matter of accuracy, please use the hands up function to indicate, and I will invite you to speak. I'm not seeing any. Okay. Members, can we take these minutes by assent? Agreed by assent?
Agreed.
Agreed. Wonderful. Thank you very much, members. Right, item 4. I have to read all of this out, I'm afraid. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they're also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the need arise through the meeting. If any member has an interest to declare, please use the hands up function now to indicate.
Got mine.
Hang on, I've got a hand up here.
Me.
Yes, I know I got you, Councillor Morley. Yes, yeah, of course.
A pecuniary interest in items 6 and 9.
Okay, thank you.
So
you
really need to know, do I go out of the meeting and then someone calls me to come back in?
And then we'll call you back in, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
okay,
you
fine.
do need to leave altogether, I'm afraid.
Sorry,
that's how it works.
Anyway.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Mrs Fleming?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary in item 5. I know the family well, so the relationship's sufficiently close, so I feel it's not appropriate for me to take part in the debate or vote. And then I wanted to clarify on agenda item 9. Last time we had a similar application there, I didn't take part because of a historic financial relationship, but having discussed with the monitoring officer, it's no longer relevant and it's historic, so I'm told that I can take part in the debate and vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Durham, please.
Thank you very much. I have a non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council who are statutory consultees in several planning considerations. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Could you just pop your hands back down again if you haven't already? Lovely, thank you. Right, we're moving on to our first planning application. It's agenda item 5, Little Grange Farm, Marlpits Road, Woodham, Mortimer. We have looking for public speakers. No public speakers? Not for this one. Okay, thank you. So, Ms King, could you present a report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Planning permission is sought for the change of use of agricultural barns to a C3 dwelling house, along with associated operational development. This is the location plan showing the proposed site outlined in red. This is the existing and proposed block plan. The plan on the left shows the existing site with the building to be demolished and the buildings to be retained. And the plan on the right shows the proposed development. These are the existing elevations showing the 2 barns to be converted into the dwelling and the barn to be demolished, which is outlined in red. These are the proposed elevations. These are the existing floor plans. These are the proposed floor plans. Scheme was previously refused at this site for conversion of the existing barns into live-work units and the erection of 2 outbuildings. These are the photos of the site showing the barns subject of the current application. The application is recommended for refusal due to the resultant intensification of residential development, which would substantially alter the character of the area and have an unacceptable visual impact upon the countryside through the urbanisation and domestication of the site. Additionally, there is an absence of a completed legal agreement to secure a financial contribution towards the mitigation of environmental harm caused by the development as required by the Essex Coastal RAMS. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, the recommendation as we've just heard is that the planning application be refused for the reasons detailed in section 8 of the report. If any member wishes to second that motion, please let me know. Anybody?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Siddle. Just for the benefit of anyone listening, a proposal or a second is not a commitment to vote in favour, just in case anyone thinks we've decided beforehand what we're doing. So, ward member. Councillor Durham or Councillor Jarvis? Who wishes to go first?
No, I'm quite happy to. Chairman, I'm not going to be protracted on this. As you can see in 8.2, the reasons for refusal, this is contrary to the local development plan. It's also given the absence of a 5-year land supply where we have to consider the presumption in favour of sustainable development. It doesn't tick the boxes in the NPPF either. And I think for the reasons that the officers have given, I do agree that this application should be refused. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman,
who else do we have?
I'm the ward member that called it in, Chairman.
Yes, you are. I'm coming to you next, Councillor Jarvis.
Okay, I've had a look through the application. I mean, I know that there was a previous application that was refused on this site, but I mean, that was for 4 dwellings, and obviously this is a different application. I mean, I am familiar with the site. I think it's quite complex. Could we just get the photographs back up again? I think that would be helpful. Okay, so if I can just look at the bottom right photo of what we were just looking at there, the first set, so the first, well, yeah, the bottom right photograph there, I mean, that's an asbestos barn which is coming down. It looks most unsightly. It's not currently used. I don't think anybody would disagree that the removal of that barn would actually improve the views that anybody might see. So just to be clear, because it's a bit complex, the application. So that barn is coming down. It's mainly asbestos cladding. When that barn comes down, behind it, and I think you can see in the top left-hand photograph, it's that middle barn. The middle barn is a very narrow, old 17th century thrashing barn, and that barn will stay. And actually, from the front, at the moment, so bottom right-hand photograph, you can't see that lovely barn. It's hidden. So when this barn is demolished, what you'll then be able to see is a very nice 17th century barn, which will just improve the look. Now, the other main aspect that's going on is obviously the conversion of the fruit apple barn, which is the top right barn you can see there, and in the left-hand picture, it's the one with the turrets on the top. That's an old apple barn which hasn't been used for some 30 years. Obviously, when the farm was an apple-based farm. So that's currently a building which is not used at all. And it seems to me that if obviously the applicant wishes to convert that tastefully without altering the exterior appearance too much into a dwelling, that would be something that we should look favourably on, because obviously we should be looking to make good use of the land and good use of an existing site where currently it's obviously of no use whatsoever. So top right hand barn, I think, would be the new dwelling. And I think it's important to understand that looking through the plans, that this isn't a case of taking down the barn and putting something up that's different. This is going to look substantially like it does at the moment, very tastefully, using taking off any asbestos tiles, replacing them with something that's aesthetically similar, leaving some turrets and putting crickle windows in. So a very tasteful design in terms of that property. So I have to say, without further ado, Chairman, I've looked at this and tried to see how this gives harm to the countryside, because I think overall this will look substantially better. I don't think there'll be any substantial urbanisation. It's not the previous application, this is just one property. And I think making good use of an existing redundant building, hasn't been used for 30 years, is something we should be keen to support. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor White?
Oops. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll try my broadband again for as long as it's going to last. I have to say I agree with everything that Councillor Jarvis has just said. I objected to the 4 dwellings because, again, it was overdevelopment. But I actually think it removes the harm on the area by removing the ugly asbestos barn, which are horrible buildings. As we all know, they need to go and they need to have to be disposed of correctly because of what they're made of. I would also propose that we put a condition on that they sign the Section 106 agreement. I think it's only a payment of £150. It's nothing too onerous. And I would have thought that this barn would have been permitted development anyway, because it was historically used for agriculture with the apples. So I don't know why it's not actually here as permitted development. It's a totally different application to the last one. We don't have a 5-year land supply, and I absolutely think this should be approved. And I'm happy to propose an alternative decision when we come to that stage. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lee, did you want to come back on any of that at the stage?
Chairman, I'm happy to come back now. I can wait if other members have any more questions or points.
Okay, well, in case we have the okay, let's move on to Councillor Keys then, please.
Oh, good evening. Could I see the site plan again, please? The outline boundary. Is it all in one boundary? Right, so that's all, that red area is owned by the same person, correct?
That would be the site in question, yes, the site looking for the application. There would be a blue line for land in the ownership. They're probably in the same place, actually.
Right, and the same exit, entrance or exit, whatever you want to put it, to the house is the same exit to the barn, correct? One entry?
So. Ms. Keane, do speak up, Ms. Keane, if you
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it would be.
Right, so how far is it from the house to the said ex-apple shed that's which they would like to turn into a house? What is the distance between the two properties?
About 20 metres.
About 20 metres. So I know this is a different application, but a few weeks ago we done an annex which was a bit further than that. I can't see. I'm happy to second or I'd put a proposal that I think we should go against the council on this, but I can't see there's a problem. No one in their right mind, if they own the house, wouldn't want to sell the place away from it. It's all the red line, which I'm told to believe it's all owned by the same person. And I think I'm making a good use of an old barn. I can't see, unless anybody can tell me, that there's another access in there, so the place could be turned away. But by the looks of that outline, I can't see any other accesses in or out of the property. So yes, I think it's a good.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Durham, did you want to come back with a legacy hand?
Well, I did, unless there's anybody else, other members want to say anything.
White's hand as well. Is Councillor White, has had a legacy hand?
Well, she's already had her go. If I have my second, I'll have my second go, if that's okay. Chairman, you know, yes, I agree with nearly everything Councillor Jarvis and other members have said. Yes, it would be a good thing to lose the asbestos barn, and it would certainly improve the aesthetics. But we're coming back to policy again. And it is very clear, it is contrary to our, not only our adopted local development plan, but even taking into account the fact that we don't have a 5-year land supply at the moment, it's also contrary to the NPPF. Now, we sat through a briefing yesterday by the planning officers, who made it extremely clear that every decision we're taking against policy, and I understand all of the arguments about treating every case at its own merits, and I'm all for that, we are absolutely giving this authority really significant issues in the future. That is indisputable. And now, Mr. Lawrence, who it's a pleasure to see back, I think he was the head of planning when we were going through the LDP. So nobody would know more than Mr. Lawrence about the implications of us constantly agreeing things contrary to the local development plan. We may as well not have one. And I have total sympathy with the applicant, and I have total sympathy with all of the arguments given. But you know, we are driving ourselves up a one-way road with no way back, and we will end up paying for this. I'm very sorry, but you know, that is the situation, and I'm sure Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Lee will confirm that. And if members are minded to agree this, then fine. But what we don't want to be is in a position in a year or two's time where we are having the problems that will result from this, and we are going to be forced into granting permissions for properties we do not want in places that we do not want them, because that certainly will be the outcome. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, I have Councillors White and Councillor Jarvis. However, what I'm going to say is this business of viewing each case on its own merits. This isn't the merits according to how we view it. This is the merits according to the policies. So whereas we are entitled to weigh up policies, maybe with different weights than our officers do, we're not actually entitled. There is no democratic right to decide that the policies don't count. So, Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to come back and say that in actual fact, we've already set a policy for change of use of barns, because I know in the last 6 months we've had the change of use of maybe 6 or 7 different barns. The last one was near Champions Lodge. I think it's in Councillor Jarvis's ward, and that was nothing like as beautiful a building as this one will be. And I think this will enhance the different. And we have already set a precedent for passing agricultural buildings into residential, and by their thing, they're not in a sustainable location, but it's no less sustainable than any others. So you know, I'm sorry, I disagree with Councillor Durham.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jarvis. Just very briefly, if you would please, if you have any new points, but we can't be doing with any more 3-hour meetings.
I've just got 3 points to make, if I may, quickly, Chairman. I mean, I attended the training session as well on National Planning Policy Framework, and I was keen to hear that making effective use of land is clearly one of the environment, economic or social items for sustainability under that framework. So this is undoubtedly making effective use of land. We're going to be taking down an old barn, which is of no use whatsoever. We're going to be showing the whole public and anybody else that can see it a new a 17th century barn that look wonderful, and they're going to make use of a building that hasn't really been used for 30 years. So I think it's going to look attractive. It's going to make effective use of the land. I was at the parish meeting when they debated this, and the whole parish, people who actually live there, they think this is a wonderful idea. This whole site, I have to say, is surrounded by a lot of distance. There's a lot of distance. The people who own this site own some of the surrounding fields, and everybody else that can see this thinks it's going to be a fantastic development. They're the people who live there, and they're the people I feel we should pay some attention to when we're looking at whether it's going to detract or not from the countryside, and when we look at the effective use of land. So,
okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Right, Mr. Lee, that's given you something to come back with, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try and keep it short. Firstly, though, obviously, if I won't quite deal with them in the order that they were presented to myself, because obviously, if I just take members to the header of the piece of the report, and the application is full planning application for the purpose of change of use from agriculture to dwelling house C3. So in relation to Councillor Keyes's point, this is actually an application for a dwelling. It's not for an annex. It will be subdivided and sold off potentially because it is for a separate independent dwelling. So that's correct, incorrect to imply that it will function as an annex, because that is not what the planning application is for. And as members are fully aware, because they've heard me say it 1,000,001 times, we have to look at the application for the lifetime, not just for who may own it now or in the short term. We have to look for the fact that could happen in 10, 15, 20 years time. Moving on, I know points raised about a barn coming down, and that that this may improve the views and allow for a view of another barn. I think my professional advice with that should be given minimal weight in the assessment of this application when you look at the conflict with the guidance within the MPPF and within our own policies, which really strongly persuade or try to guide decision making away from provision of dwellings in rural areas that are not close to the day-to-day facilities that are needed for living. And as the office report covers in detail, this site is exactly an example of that. The fact that the barn hasn't been used for 30 years to some extent should be a moot point. Our policy does allow for reuse of agricultural buildings, but that does not promote at any stage the reuse for residential use, and that is something that is also supported by the MPPF. So to echo what the chairman said, Councillor Thompson, each application must be determined on its own merits, but the starting point is the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. It's the interpretation of those policies should be consistent, whether it's officers, members, which committee, because they're clear requirements. And once again, it feels that the actual content of the policies is not being given any real weight in the assessment. There appears to be quite a strong presumption in personal feeling, which is not what we're here to determine applications in. This is a quasi-judicial process where policies are the starting point unless material considerations indicate otherwise. As Councillor Durham said, each application will potentially be used against us, to basically summarise what he said. And the statement that was made by members today almost would imply that any agricultural building is allowed to be used for, any agricultural building can be submitted and converted into a dwelling without, and that would be policy compliant. Yep. Unfortunately, that is not what our policy states, and it'd be a very dangerous precedent to make to use that as an argument. Once again, I'd also highlight that I'd say the fact that it's considered to be a tasteful design and not really substantially change the appearance of the building wouldn't really carry much weight in my advice in the determination of this application. In relation to Councillor White's point about permitted development, couldn't comment one way or the other because they haven't submitted a prior approval. Obviously, if they had, that legislation is separate to a plan application, and obviously officers would have happily assessed that, but that isn't in front of us. So without an agreement on that through the submission of an application or a law development certificate or anything like that, I think the potential for that should be given limited weight in the termination of this application. in relation to Councillor Durham's point about we might as well not have a local plan, to a certain extent, you know, it wouldn't matter, because this point is the policies are completely consistent with the NPPF. If we didn't have a local plan, we would be determining by the NPPF alone. And the NPPF is clear that dwellings in remote locations are not acceptable, and that is what this application is. So whether we had the local plan or the NPPF, it wouldn't matter, as in we would be getting a recommendation for refusal from officers in this aspect. In relation to comments about making better use of land, that I cannot say that the NPPF, in my professional opinion, at no stage does it say that the use of agricultural fields or agricultural buildings for residential dwellings is a better use of land. It's clear about reuse of brownfield land, clear about within settlement boundaries, etc. But it does not encourage anywhere within the NPPF of the general presumption of converting agricultural buildings to residential dwellings. Finally, in relation to the points raised, the fact that the parish meeting may have been supportive and that members of public in close proximity may be keen on the development is not a material consideration. Case law is clear, and I think members need to be very conscious of that and very conscious of what they say in debates when there is quite clear case law that makes points such as that. And popularity of an application, either for or against, is not a material consideration. It needs to consider the material considerations of the application, the policies, government guidance, planning history, etc. And once again, I just state again, popularity of an application is not a material consideration. And the only other thing I'd like to quickly raise, Chairman, is that the reason for refusal one.
Hello.
I think someone unmute. Sorry, reason for refusal one relates to both the impact on the character of the air, but also on sustainability in relation to access to facilities. And while members have raised some argument in relation to some betterment for the appearance, and you know, they may be trying to argue that the harm from the increased residential development will be offset by the views of the barn, etc. There's been no discussion about the access to day-to-day facilities, the need to use a private car. This is a very remote site, and we need to, as an authority, be taking a consistent approach. And as Councillor Durham said, you know, if we don't do that, you'll be making officers' position very difficult for future dwellings, especially as we haven't got a 5-year land supply. If we start to say that remote locations like this are acceptable for residential dwelling. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Durham, is that a legacy hand? Because I'd really like to go on to a vote.
It isn't a legacy hand, Chairman.
Okay.
I've got a request.
Very quickly. It is your third.
Chairman, yes, I would. Yes, but I would like this statement put on record, please. That if this committee agree this planning application, it will be contrary to the local development plan and aspects of the national planning policy framework, and as such will be contrary to the law regarding the determination of planning applications by a local planning authority. And I think it's very important that members understand the implications of that, but I would like that placed on record, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I know you've got your hand up again, Councillor White, but I think I would like to vote on the recommendation and then we'll take it from there. Okay, Katie, could we have a roll call, please, for the recommendation to refuse or against, or of course abstentions? Thank you.
Yes, Chairman. Members, I'll take your name in alphabetical order. Please could you indicate whether you are for, against or abstaining? Starting with Councillor Durham, please.
You're muted, Councillor.
This is the decision for the refusal of the application. That's what we're determining.
Yes, this is we're voting for the officer's recommendation. I vote for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Fleming.
Katie, I'm sitting this one out.
Apologies. Yes, thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
I'm against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
I'm also against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
I'm against.
Councillor Siddle.
For.
you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Miss White.
Against.
Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So sorry, Katie, please give us the numbers. Sorry, I'm jumping in.
Fine. You have 3 for and 4 against with no abstentions.
Okay, thank you. So that is lost. So I need to move on. I need a proposal to presumably do the opposite, and I need that to be with reasons, please. Okay, well, Councillor Jarvis has his hands up and he did call it in. So let's hear it from Councillor Jarvis, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to propose the application on the basis that it makes effective use of land. It's no material harm at all to the countryside. Those would be an effective use of an existing site. They would be some of the reasons I would give, Chairman.
I will second that.
I believe it is.
No, well, we're not quite there. We're not quite there because Councillor Jarvis, you need to address the reasons for refusal as given in the report, not just give different reasons. So you need to explain. You need to justify in regards to the sustainability credentials, etc.
Sorry, Chairman, can I also highlight that our actual adopted policy does not accept that the reuse of an agricultural building is an effective use of land. Our policy that does deal with that clearly states that that isn't, and that's something that's been supported at numerous appeals. So statements such as that would be 100% conflicting with both our policy, planning history for this site, or not for this site, for within the district, and would be very dangerous to start to make decisions based on that, because it is completely conflicting and would then imply that any agricultural building could be used as a dwelling, or any piece of land could be used as a building, because that would be a more appropriate use than agricultural use, which is a very dangerous decision based on the nature of our district. That's what I'll just advise members.
Right, I hear what you're saying, but I can only ask Councillor Jarvis to reconsider that and address the sustainability.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I was just making a remark that came up in the training session that we recently had on the National Policy Planning Framework. Effective use of land was given by Officer Lee, clearly as one of the reasons. So I'm just using that. That seems to make sense to me. He's the professional, but seems to me that as far as sustainability issues are concerned, I'm not. This property is not in the middle of a town. It is fairly isolated. Nobody's denying that. Obviously, they could use bikes if they wanted to go somewhere. Look, it's in the country. Nobody's saying it isn't in the country. I think the main reason I thought that was given by the officer for not wanting to refuse this property was because it was a detrimental effect on the countryside. That was the main reason given. I just simply don't think that's the case. I think it has negligible impact on the countryside. In fact, if anything, all development, as Officer Lee told us in the training session, all developments of any sort will always have, to a degree, an effect on the countryside. But this really will have negligible effect. The building will look substantially the same. The removal of other buildings will probably improve the look of the countryside. So the main reason given for refusal, as I understand it, is the impact on the countryside, and I simply don't think that's the case. I think it's a poor assessment, and it's one of the reasons I'd like to approve it.
Through you, Chairman, just for clarity, I'm sure Councillor Jarvis has read the officer's report, but just to read the conclusion, or the final line of the conclusion. Furthermore, due to the remote location of the site and the distance to public services, it's considered that development would not be located within a suitable, sustainable location, which is also echoed in a much larger section within the officer's report. So, so that needs to also be dealt and is contained within the reason for refusal, but that also has to be. It's not a case of the officers have only putting up a slight reason for refusal. And as I explained, it's always reason for approval is within the member's gift, but I think members need to be very careful of the wording they use, because these will be used against us, and we are a very rural district. We no longer have a 5-year land supply, which means that the decisions that we make at every committee and at officer level at delegated will be constantly put into the melting pot to be a balancing exercise. And I think we've just got to be very conscious of that, members. And
thank you, Matt.
And I just would like to, I keep getting quoted back about the effective use of land, but that is in relation to certain aspects. That does not mean any use becomes effective use land, because, and highlight that we have a policy that explains what that is, and residential development is not that. So, you know, I just advise that.
Yeah, Chairman,
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
Chairman, regarding sustainability point, you know, this is a development which is not in the centre of town. This is in the middle of the country. I don't know. Nobody is denying that fact, but I think there are other, in terms of, I think what Officer Lee would describe as the sort of tilted balance. There are other aspects which are in its favour, and that those, perhaps I could ask other councillors to chip in if that's all right, Chairman.
May I? Well, yes, I'm driving for a proposal here, not a new debate. So, Councillor White.
All I'd like to say is that we determine every application on its own merits, and we believe that the improvement in the visual impact actually overweighs the harm of the sustainable location, and therefore we find this application suitable for approval, or words along those lines.
Well, it's concise. Councillor Jarvis, are you happy to accept that as
yes, I think
your wording?
Councillor White succinctly said what I was perhaps struggling to say. Thank you, Councillor White.
Okay, so I think that becomes Councillor White's proposal. I know Councillor Keys was prepared to second it, but will one or other of you please second it?
I thought she was letting
I'm happy to second it. Seconded by
right.
Councillor Keys.
Now we do need some conditions, and I'm rather assuming that the legal agreement pursuant to the RAMS, it will be included as a as a condition. And Councillor White, now that it's your proposal, are you prepared to leave the other conditions to be dealt with in consultation with myself as chairman and the board members?
Absolutely, that would be fantastic.
Unless there's anything special you have in mind.
No,
Mr. Lee, is there anything special in mind?
Sorry, Chairman. Through you, what obviously...
all the standard ones, obviously.
In respect to this application, it wouldn't be that we should be granting approval, because it's for what it would be that delegated to officers subject to completion of a Section 106 agreement for the UU for the financial contribution. So any recommendation wouldn't be to grant planning permission anyway. It'd be to delegate to officers subject to completion of a unilateral undertaking.
Okay. Yes, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. I do know that. I should know that. So I think we're there. So we have a proposal to delegate this to the officers on the basis of them sorting out the legal agreement for the reasons as given by Councillor Mr. White. So could we have the vote, please, Katie? Just to check, Councillor Jarvis, did you leave the meeting, or did you lose your connection at some point?
No, I've got another connection here, Chairman. I left the main one, but I've got another connection here.
Okay, as long as you weren't missing for more than a few seconds, because that would mean you couldn't vote.
Yeah, I realise that. No, I made sure I got two connections so I wouldn't miss the debate. Apologies if that I left one of the mics on, double mic on, but apologies for that. But I was here at the meeting.
Okay. Right, thank you. Katie, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillors, I'll take your name in alphabetical order. This is for the approval. Councillor Durham, please.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
For, please, Cody.
Councillor Morley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Miss White.
For.
Thank you. Chairman, that's 4, 3 against and no abstentions.
Okay, thank you. So that is delegated to ultimately be approved in as long as we have the legal agreement. Right, moving on. Item 6 on our agenda. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my mouth here. The Willows, Brickhouse Road, Tolleshunt Major. Ms Parker Haynes is going to present the report, and we do have some speakers on this. So thank you. Ms Parker Haynes, please.
Chairman, I've got to leave the meeting.
Oh yes, of course you have. Yes.
Okay.
Pecuniary interest noted, Councillor Morley, and we will invite you back in before the next one starts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Planning permission is sought for alterations to the existing kennels and the replacement of kennels with 2 log cabins. This is the location plan. These are the existing and proposed block plans. These are the existing elevations of the kennels and run to the northern boundary of the site. These are the proposed elevations and floor plans of the replacement log cabins to be used as kennels to the northern boundary of the site. These are the existing elevations and floor plans of the kennels to the southern boundary of the site. These are the proposed elevations and floor plans of the kennels to the southern boundary of the site. And these are some photographs of the site. It is noted that a number of concerns have been raised in relation to the number of dogs to be kept at the site and the associated noise and odour nuisance this would cause. As discussed in section 5.6 of the officer report, due to the passage of time, it is considered on the balance of probabilities that the site has a lawful sui generis use, incorporating the breeding and kennelling of dogs, and in this instance, the intensification of this use is not considered to be a material change of use, and therefore it is considered that to ensure the use of the site remains acceptable in planning terms, conditions are imposed to secure details in relation to odour and noise management plans, restricting the number of dogs on site, and details in relation to the storage of refuse and waste. This application is recommended for approval. It is considered that the proposed works would not harm the appearance or character of the locality, and due to the relationship with adjoining properties and the inclusion of appropriately worded conditions, the proposed development is not considered to result in any undue harm by way of overlooking or loss of amenity to neighbouring residents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, so our first public speaker is Mr. Williams. So can we get you on your video and microphone, please, Mr. Williams? And you have 2 minutes. Do we have a clock, Katie?
Yes, I'll start the timer when Mr. Williams starts speaking.
And Mr. Williams, when we can see you and you're ready, we won't start the clock until you actually begin to speak, and then you have 2 minutes.
Madam Chairman, I'm representing the residents adjacent to the proposed development. The occupants of this property have been breeding dogs for a number of years. I've lived in my cottage for 25 years and have never seen any number of dogs in the kennels that were supposedly existing. The breeding was done in the house. So I didn't have a problem with noise or smell, but my neighbours did because of the extractor fans. My main objection is that the buildings have commenced and completed in the last few months without the planning approval. And currently there is a cabin B which is on the plans. There's also a dog run which was removed from the plans in December. So you're looking at the wrong application. With respect, the planning committee are looking at 297-001 revision F, whereas the current plan showed 297-001 revision H, with the dog runs removed.
Yeah, that's Bernie. Who's doing that, Bernie?
In addition, the noise issue was related to 2 cabins, which is fine if they were properly insulated. But you can't have a noise management system in an open mesh cage. In addition to that, according to your last statement, the code of practice relates to the number of square metres per dog. So you're allowed 4 square metres per dog or an additional 1.5 square metres for 2 dogs, which is fine. The problem is that breeding females need 8 square metres and there's nothing in any of the plans which gives that space for a breeding female. In my conclusion, the planning committee is reviewing the wrong application, and the accommodation does not comply with the kennel licensing regulations.
I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, I have to stop you there. You have used your 2 minutes, but thank you very much for that. Now we have Mr. Tony Payne, who is the chairman of the parish council, and he is representing the parish council. Mr. Payne, are you ready? Mr. Payne. Sorry, Mr. Williams, could you please turn off your microphone? Thank you. Right, Mr. Payne, can we get you into the meeting?
Yeah, I'm pretty there.
Oh, we can hear you. If you have trouble with your internet connection and you can't show your video, then that's a pity.
No, we
but
can
we'll
see
have to
him,
live
Chairman.
as long as we can hear you.
Can see him. I can see him.
Oh, I can't. Sorry. You're on my
too.
list at the bottom. Okie dokie. Right, Mr. Payne, you have 2 minutes from when you begin to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Further to our previously submitted objection to this application and our subsequent reading of the committee report, we continue to have concerns regarding the impact upon neighbouring properties and believe it is contrary to the following planning policies. D1(1)D refers to layout, orientation and density. We consider the more easterly positioning and close proximity of the 2 new log cabins within the garden will, in comparison to the existing run, be highly visible to the residents of the chalet. The increase in size to the garage will increase the density of development in the garden and increase visibility from neighbouring gardens. D1(2) refers to usable private and public amenity places. We consider the noise from 18 bitches plus 3 stud dogs will no longer allow the gardens of nearby neighbours to be usable places. Currently, most of the dogs at this property are in the house. It is about 12 years since the existing run has been occupied by dogs. This application therefore presents a substantial increase in the noise levels which will be generated outdoors. This will deny neighbours their right to quiet enjoyment of their properties. D1(4) refers to the protection of the surrounding areas in terms of noise, smell and visual impact. We continue to have concerns about the smell from the garden and the visual impact and smell from the replacement waste bins at the front of the property in this residential area. Finally, the report makes reference to policies E4 and H7, which relate to rural employment and land-based rural businesses. We do not consider that dog breeding is exclusively a rural enterprise in terms of employment or premises, and therefore E4 and H7 are not grounds for approval of this application. The Willows shares a boundary with 5 properties, including Cranbrook Cottage, which is incorrectly labelled on the report site map. Cranbrook is attached to Saffron Cottage. The Willows is not an isolated rural building, therefore this development will have a detrimental impact on neighbouring... I'm
sorry, Mr. Payne, I have to stop you there. I'm sorry, you've just run out of time.
Thank you.
Our third speaker on this agenda item is Mark Jackson, who is the agent. Mr. Jackson, please. Same rules for you. As soon as we get you online, we'll start the timer for 2 minutes when you start to speak. Thank you.
Can you all hear me, members?
I can, thank you.
Good.
Everybody else okay? Yes. Thank you. Right.
Good evening, members. Good evening, members. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak on behalf of Mrs. O'Connor, the applicant and the owner of the property Willows. The application site includes the bungalow and the kennels. The business has been operating from Willows for 35 years for dog breeding. The use is lawful. A variety of dogs have been bred, many of them show winners. The owners have a Malden District Council licence for a maximum of 20 dogs, and the business now concentrates on the breeding of cockapoos. The officer recommendation is to grant planning permission. The proposal just seeks the replacement of existing kennels with 2 log cabins and the extension and re-roofing of the kennel to the south of the site. The number of dogs will not change. The application is made to accord with the Animal Welfare Regulations 2018. The upgraded materials and insulation proposed will further improve local amenity and reduce potential noise impact to the neighbouring premises. My clients agree with the conditions recommended to you by the Planning Officer and Environmental Health Officer on page 45 of your agenda. In respect of the suggested condition 5, a noise management plan has been drafted and will be formally submitted to seek the discharge of this planning condition. The replacement of the existing kennel buildings, which have been on site for many years with new, modern and well-insulated kennels, will be a considerable improvement to the amenities enjoyed by the residents. They have been designed following the advice of an acoustic engineer. The Council Environmental Health Officer has advised the Council that he has no objection in principle to the proposed development, but does not wish for the number of dogs to be increased on the site. Officers have addressed this by suggesting to members the imposition of Planning Condition 7, referring to a maximum of 20 dogs. Members are invited to grant planning permission subject to the imposition of the recommended planning conditions. Thank you.
That's good. 2 minutes. Thank you. That's good timing. Thank you. Right. Councillor Durham, I do have you, but first I've got a couple of questions.
Well, Chairman,
you have to leave.
Chairman, I'm sorry. Yeah, I regret. I did inform you earlier that
Yes,
I know it's very hard to envisage a more important meeting than North West Area Planning, but I regret there is one. So I do have to leave you. And I would just say, yeah, thank you very much indeed. And I'm sure members will make the right decisions. Thank you and good night, everybody.
Thank you and good night, Councillor Durham. Right, before I go on to any members, can I ask Mr. Lee to just address this business of whether we're looking at the right plans or not, if you can.
Might be appropriate if the case officer picks that up.
Okay. Ms. Parker-Haynes?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that the plans provided are the accurate plans of what is proposed.
Of what's proposed, but are they accurate plans of what's been built, given that some of it has been built?
As you will be aware, the planning system does allow for partially retrospective applications. So if works have begun, that's not a material consideration in the determination of the application.
No, I'm with you on that. Much as I know all members hate people who build first, but
to a certain extent, it's a moot point. The application is in front of us, is what is in front of us. We have to determine this application. If something is being built on site that doesn't fall within the remit of this permission, that would be a matter for the planning enforcement team and potentially subsequently a second submission of an application. But what we have in front of us is the application tonight for determination as submitted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that clarification. I was wondering if we should defer, but obviously not. Right, members, I will have my go quickly first, as I'm the only ward member who can speak on it. I've actually called this in because there is so much neighbour concern, and I know how concerned the parish council is. So I do want to have everything aired, because what worries me is that most of the objections are not actually planning matters. I know Mr. Lee will bear me out on that, which does put us in a very difficult position should we turn this down, because anything that can be controlled by condition, I'm sure Mr. Lee will bear me out, must be controlled by a condition. It cannot be a reason for refusal. Am I right there, Mr. Lee?
Yes, Chairman, that's correct.
That's correct. So, okay, so I'm going to find it very difficult to do anything other than support the officer's recommendation, even though I understand how the residents feel. I don't think planning is the right way to address their concerns. Right, so other members wishing to speak, please. Councillor Siddle. Mr. Williams has a hand up, but could you take your hand away, please, Mr. Williams? You don't get it. There isn't another go, I'm afraid, for you. Sorry, Councillor Siddle, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I like you have concerns about this application, and I understand that there are conditions being put in place in terms of the planning application. However, I think the impact that it has and the impact it will, the new buildings and things like that have on the surrounding properties it's not going to be a nice design. It's not going to be something that is beneficial to the other properties. So I do have concerns about passing this application. I have concerns that they will adhere to the limit on 20 dogs, and how can we ensure that gets enforced? That would be very, very difficult to get enforced. There are lots of issues at the moment that they aren't following the correct procedure in terms of waste disposal, and residents around the property at the moment, the waste is disposed in a skip, which in the summer is open to the air, is there's lots of flies, creates lots of smell. The dogs bark. I live probably half a mile away, and at times I can hear the dogs barking. So there is a huge noise consideration as well. So I'm in a very difficult situation in terms of, I can see the reasons why this shouldn't be passed. I can see the reasons why it should be passed, and I have lots of concerns about it. And and the fact that they haven't operated correctly previously, and whether they will continue, whether they will start operating and adhere to the conditions that are being applied. I have grave concerns over that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Siddle. Yes, I do too, but they're not reasons for planning refusal. Who else do we have? Councillor Fleming, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Mr. Lee about noise. Noise would be a valid reason for refusal, as I understand it. I don't know, has the sort of noise that's currently there, has that been sort of investigated in the past? Have there been complaints in the past?
I think the main point there is that the dogs were previously being kept in the house, but they need more room. Sorry, Mr. Lee, I didn't mean to stop you.
So that's fine, Chairman. I'm only talking through you anyway, so I should wait for you to invite me in. I'm probably a little bit too eager and keen at times.
We like eager. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
My age is lucky, and this time in the evening, you're lucky to get me eager and keen, I suppose. What I was going to say is the planning noise is clearly a material consideration in terms of a planning application, and it is something obviously officers have looked at. The site lawfully, from what we can work out, has had 20 dogs or license for 20 dogs. So on the balance probability has had that or around that for well excess of 10 years. So the breeding of dogs as a commercial enterprise on this site is lawful. As Councillor Siddle said, there may well already be experience in noise and issues, but it's not been to such a degree that Environmental Health have found it to be a statutory nuisance and to take action. So that is the starting point with any future application, is the fallback positions. Doesn't matter whether it was this application or anything else, always if there is a fallback position, so that's a lawful use or extant permission or whatever, we need to start from there and to consider what they're proposing now compared to what is on site. I know a member of public said they're not really using the existing buildings for breeding, but they have the right to do that, and they could do that tomorrow without the need for planning permission. Those existing buildings probably not necessarily as potentially as noise secure as what a new building would be, or how we can control it through condition. So we've got to be minded that those existing structures on site could be used for the housing of dogs and the noise that could come from that. So officers have assessed this application, obviously looked at the noise issues, and we consider that there's the potential, just like with any planning application, for there to be noise. And in this case, if we were to leave it unmitigated, it could be quite bad, for want of a better phrase. So what we've looked at and taken into account is a number of conditions. One would be condition 5, which requires a noise management plan to be submitted to the council, and that will be approved, and that the details will be fully implemented before the first use of the development hereby approved. So the fact that even if they have or haven't started the development, actually in this matter doesn't really matter, because if they built the whole building but they don't put any dogs in it, there's no noise issue because there's no dogs in it. So all we want to do is make sure that any noise is mitigated before there actually has a dog put in that building. So that's condition 5 on the conditions that we're suggesting. Also, in relation to the balance probabilities and everything, officers are conscious that there's probably been around 20 dogs, including bitches, so on site historically. The licence, in theory, could be increased in the future. I know you could argue it's unlikely because of, you know, standards on health of the dogs, etc., are likely to get more generous, not more restricted. But actually, we don't know that. So officers have taken a fairly pragmatic approach and actually also recommended a condition that limits the number of dogs on site for breeding, whether it's dogs or bitches, to 20, and that is condition 7. So I think personally and professionally, those two conditions would actually mitigate any noise harm that would be worse than what's currently on site, or the potential for what's currently on site, because at the end of the day, we can only deal with future problems. We can't deal with existing problems. So I think in all likelihood, the proposal, if built out and taking into account the conditions and if done appropriately, would be less of an impact in noise than the existing situation should be. But also, I'm speaking anyway to jump point on relation to Councillor Siddle raised in relation to odour. We're quite aware that there's been a number of issues raised around how it's being stored at the moment, and we've imposed a condition under recommending a condition under condition 6, which requires details of how refuse and waste will be stored, and that will be implemented and will be dealt with. In relation to Councillor Siddle's point about enforcement, we can only enforce what we can enforce, and if we've got conditions, we can enforce it. At the moment, there are no planning restrictions on the site, so there is nothing planning could do in relation to enforcement of, so that'd be waste, noise, odour, and amenity in planning terms is a much lower harmful standard than statutory nuisance, which is environmental health. So I would hope that in all reality that noise should be less of an impact on neighbours from this proposal, and if there was any breaches, we would be able to regularise that and resolve them. But as Councillor Thompson said in relation to that, just because somebody may or may not, and I'm not going to comment one way or the other about this applicant, it's just a general point, if someone does or does not have a history of doing what they should do, for want of a better phrase, whether it's planning legislation or building regs or whatever, that's not a material consideration for the determination of the application. You have to treat everybody as though they are reasonable. So with those in mind, I think the recommendation covers most of the points that the public have raised, and actually will hopefully, touch wood, make actually a better situation, and then could be, if worst case scenario, as is. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Actually, I've realised I haven't in fact put the recommendation, so I'm going to put the recommendation that it be approved. Could I have a seconder, just for the sake of debate, please? Somebody, anybody?
I'll second it. John Case.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Keys. Duly seconded. I do have one more question for you, Mr. Lee, though I can see Councillor White would like to speak. The business of the storage of refuse and waste, who determines what is acceptable, and is what is done now automatically acceptable? Or is that a question for environmental health?
Through Chairman, just because it's done now doesn't mean it will automatically be acceptable. No, to a certain extent, obviously, you could argue that we will have to be a bit more lenient than if it was a brand new development. But I don't think that planning would consider, if what's happening is happening and it's happening constantly, etc., that would be an appropriate method. So we would still look at what is expected to protect the amenity of neighbours, etc., and we would work with environmental health to make sure that it was a robust method of dealing with the waste. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Right, Ms. White, I'm sorry to have kept you.
That's okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, I'm sort of sitting on the fence this one. I do have some concerns. The application isn't clear, and I can't get into my council emails because if I get off this screen, I can't get back into it. But if I'm right, it looks like it's demolishing one building to replace that with 2 log cabins. And then the other thing is to put quite a large extension on another building. Now, what I want to know is how close are all of these to the neighbouring properties? Because it looks like it's got houses all the way around. And I have to say I am concerned that environmental health have concerns over the application. And the final thing is, on disposing of the waste, bearing in mind it is a residential location, they mentioned they've got a tank, which I presume is like an inceptor. I don't know if it is or not. But what happens to the solids? Because I wouldn't imagine you could flush all of it down the inceptor. And I'm not really too bothered whether it's a new application or an old one. I think if it's approved, the conditions need to be absolutely top notch to protect the residents. Now, I haven't decided which way I'm going to vote yet on this one, because I've got equal sympathy with both the applicant and the neighbours. So I want to be absolutely certain before I decide what is happening with all of the waste. And I think this is very, very important, and there should be some really stringent conditions attached. But if I could have a look at the buildings that are there, and then a block plan showing the bits that are being demolished and the bits are being extended, because unfortunately I can't get to the other ones. So there's a few questions there.
Yes, please. I think all members might appreciate that. Thank you. I think they're on the same footprints, more or less.
Chairman, can I give you an answer to Councillor White in terms of waste and in terms of my understanding from what I've been informed by residents?
Yes, please do. But if Ms Parker Haynes could get the required drawings up while you do that, that would be helpful. OK, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. So at the moment, my understanding from the residents who are next to the property is the solid wastes are put into an open skip currently, which is at the front of the property. Hence why there's a problem with odour and flies currently.
Quite, yes, I do know they are using the skip. I believe it's bagged up. And that was the reason for my question to Mr. Lee of whether what is currently happening is automatically acceptable, because in my view, that is not acceptable. It just isn't. So what else, if anything else is going down a drain or into a tank, I don't know. But certainly if we do agree to approve this, I'm going to check with Mr. Lee that we absolutely have these conditions as tight as we can. Right, sorry, as for boundaries, perhaps Ms Parker Haynes, you could point out if they are in fact more or less on the same footprint, or if anything is nearer to other people's boundaries than has been.
Thank you, Chairman. So the proposed log cabin is actually located 0.01 metre further from the shared boundary with the chalet. And
0.01.
Yeah. And
what's that in old money? Tiny.
Yeah.
But at any rate, not nearer. Okay.
Yeah. And obviously it's an increase in depth to the southern boundary with Saffron Cottage, but this is minor.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor White, your hand's up again. Yes, another question?
Thank you, Manager. Yeah, it's just to double check where the sewage goes, because presumably if it's licensed, I would have expected all this to have been submitted with the application, because I think waste and the inceptor tank is absolutely vital. And my thoughts are, if we don't have all of this, that it should be deferred until we do have the relevant information, because it's you know, I feel for the neighbours and I want to make the best decision I can, and I am concerned that this isn't overly clear on what's happening to the waste.
I think you're absolutely right with your concern for the neighbours. I'd like to think we can make sure that this is done by condition rather than having to wait and see, because what does happen is less important to me than what happens in the future, which I'm about to ask Mr. Lee if we can tie down. So, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, you know, as I've already said, you know, this use is lawful, and to a certain extent, what they do with the waste now is not a material consideration for determination of this application. Whether it's appropriate or not is a different matter, but it's not a discussion for the planning committee. It's not a material consideration for this application.
No.
As I've said, you know, I think, go back to the number, I can't remember which condition 6, I think it was, states that, you know, details in relation to storage of refuse and waste shall be provided in full writing by the local. So it should catch on. Right, okay, I'd actually want to get that probably slightly amended, the wording. writing to the local authority. It should be the details as approved shall be fully implemented prior to the first use of the development, hereby permitted and retained as such thereafter. Conditions fine, but it could be made a little bit clearer maybe. But so
okay, well, if we agree this, I will put it with the changed.
But I would, I'd suggest that the existing situation, you know, anecdotally, isn't great, but that isn't a consideration for the termination of this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Because determining not determining it, not approving it doesn't stop what happens now. Okay. Right, members, I don't have any more hands up, so I think we should. Oh, could we have our screen back, please, Ms. Parkgate? Thank you for that.
Apology.
Of course, no, absolutely fine. I think we should vote then, please, members. Katie, could you take a roll call?
Yes, Chairman. So we are
voting. Can you hear me?
Hello, yes?
Sorry,
I can hear someone.
It's Mr. Johnson, but I've got a bad
hello.
network.
Sorry, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah. Now, so I just wanted to just get in quickly before you went to the vote. I've just had a look at the case file to try and ascertain some indication of what the applicant might be considering in terms of the waste and refuse condition. And I suppose what has given officers some support in that condition is that they had stated, and this is in response particularly to the concerns raised by local residents, that they said that they have a contract starting early next year as planned for specialist waste collection. The skip is currently being replaced with 2 large lidded bins that will be emptied either weekly or fortnightly, depending on how full they are. Now, based around that will give us some indication of the sort of detail we could look at and that we could work with to see whether that would be appropriate, and also in consultation with our environmental health. So if that gives any sort of assistance in the direction within which we'd be looking at details for the conditions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Right, Mr. Lee, please come back.
Sorry, Chairman, I've just actually reread the condition, and actually, no, it is fine. It was me just stumbling over it when I was reading it out loud and trying to process the words that were going through my brain at the same time. Sorry about that. No, the condition is fine. Yeah, I missed one of the words when I was reading it. Thanks.
Okay. Oh, Miss White just took her hand down, so I think you might have just answered the question, or not. Can't hear you.
Sorry, I was just going to say that basically I think if we can beef up the conditions and make them really, really stringent, it would actually be a benefit of the neighbours. It would be better than what's there, but it is on a caveat. The conditions are really, really strong.
Okay, but as Mr. Lee says, we can only do what we can do. But Mr. Lee, is there any, or Mr. Johnson, are there any options in there?
Through Chairman, the condition at the moment asks for details to be submitted. Not really any way of beefing that up, to use Councillor White's phrase, because it's not asking for anything per se. It's just asking for details for us to consider, and without any best practice or anything like that. I wouldn't want to be putting anything like that into the condition, but that would be stuff we would consider normally when dealing with the condition anyway.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I suppose the only thing I would sort of add to that is possibly just look at the condition where it says details related to storage and refuse and waste. I mean, we could there can be some leading elements within the conditions of some of the direction where we're going, like location. So, for example, the location may be an issue, yeah, which is something that as part of developing the conditions, we can consider whether that's appropriate or not. Obviously, again, that's something that we would work up with the applicant. But if that can give members some sort of confidence in terms of the direction that we'd be looking to any discharge of conditions. I mean, there's been an indication in terms of the type of covering and enclosure, but I suppose also the location is something that could be a consideration.
Right, although looking at the plan, I think that's quite limited, but yes, as long as that's added to the wording, I'm certainly prepared to carry on with the recommendation as it is with that amendment. Okay, I'm hoping Councillor Keys, who seconded it, will agree.
Dear Chairman, for clarity,
yes.
Would you like so? Would it be?
Thank you.
Details in relation to the storage of refuse and waste, including location, shall be provided and approved in writing by the local plan authority. And then obviously carrying on the rest of the
collections and things, you know, that they offered. Make sure that's in there too.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think obviously details in relation to storage and that's all of what we would be looking at. And I think I wouldn't want to get into a point where we listed off too many bullet points, because then there could be bits that we would want that we haven't stated. It could be argued that
you
we
haven't.
don't need them.
Absolutely.
Less is more
I'm
quite
absolutely
often in
certain
cases.
that I'm certain our officers have got the message about how keen we are.
I think we have.
If it's going to happen, we haven't voted yet, but if it's going to happen, it's got to be right.
I mean, details of collection. Yeah. So I was just going to say, details of collection is something that would normally be a little bit difficult, because that may depend on the contract.
Quite. Okay. Thank you. I think we'll have a vote now, Katie, please. And we are voting, as Katie will probably say anyway in a minute, on the recommendation to approve.
Thank you, Chairman. So we are voting to approve the application as per the officer's report. Members, I will take your name in alphabetical order. If you could tell me for, against or abstain, please. Councillor Mrs. Fleming.
Against, Katie.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
For, Katie.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Miss White.
For, because I think the conditions will improve what the residents currently have to live next to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Katie, how does that stack up?
That's 4 for and 2 against. No abstentions.
Okay, thank you. Well, that is passed in accordance with the officer's recommendation and report. Thank you. Right, we need to get Mr. Morley, Councillor Morley, back in. Can we do that, or should I text him?
Do Chairman, we should be able to call him in.
I'm not sure if there's an official way of doing this, but anyway.
I'm back.
He's back. Yeah. Oh, he's back. He's back. He's back. Excellent. Thank you.
Right, that was you.
That's probably me.
Okay.
Okay, right, everyone's back. Right, we've got to start moving a bit faster now, I'm afraid, members. So we have item 7 on our agenda, our third planning application, which is land rear of Hill Barn, Rectory Lane, Woodham, Walter. So we have Miss Bowles to present the report, and then 2 submissions, one from an objector and one from the agent. Okay, so Miss Bowles, please.
Thank you, Chair. So planning permission is sought for the conversion of existing equestrian and storage buildings to form offices with associated access, parking and landscaping. We've got the block plan, and this is a subject building just here. Sorry, that was the location plan. This is the block plan. You can see the parking area and an area of hard stand into the front of the building. There's some new tree screens proposed in the area.
I hate to say this, but I can't see much of anything. Is there any possibility of zooming? Oh, that's better, thank you.
We've got the existing elevations.
and the proposed elevations. The physical changes relate to the changing of the metal roof sheeting with plain tiles and new and upgraded window and door openings. We've got the existing floor plan and the proposed floor plan. The footprint of the building will remain as existing. And then we've got some site photographs. Having taken all the material planning considerations into account, it's not considered that the development would be acceptable in principle. The proposal fails to meet all of the criteria contained within policy 4 of the LDP, given the inadequate information to support the justifiable and functional need. The harmful visual impact resulting from the urbanisation of the existing rural site and countryside has not been adequately justified and would not be offset by the benefits in this instance. Therefore, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, so we have our 2 public participants. So we have Mr. Goff, who's an objector. Mr. Goff, can we get you up and running?
Hello.
Hello, right, if you're able to speak, please use your video if that's possible. If it isn't, that's fine too, we'll have to live with that. You have 2 minutes from when you begin to speak, so when you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members, my name is Stephen Goff. I live with my family at Hill Place, Rectory Lane, which is our family home, and one of the closest properties to the development proposed by this application. We believe these proposals are contrary to the policies in your adopted local plan. The location of this site is remote, well outside the boundary of any recognised settlement. This is in no sense a sustainable location for this type of development. Every journey associated with the proposed office will of necessity be made by motor vehicle, which again is not sustainable. This will add traffic to a quiet, unlit single-track lane with no passing places, to the detriment of existing residents, pedestrians, cyclists and horse riders who regularly use Rectory Lane. This proposed office development, by virtue of its urbanising characteristics, will appear intrusive in this tranquil rural landscape, to the considerable detriment of those like ourselves who live here and those who frequently walk along Rectory Lane and the public footpaths from which the proposed development is prominently visible. It is clear that there may be benefits to the creation of employment in this case, yet this application tells us relatively little about the use proposed or about any functional need or other justification for this development in this location, as is required by your local plan policies. Any such claimed benefit will of course be extremely limited and more than outweighed by the very substantial harm which will result if this application is approved. We support the conclusions of your officers and strongly urge members to vote this evening with officers' recommendation and refuse planning permission. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. And now we have Mr. Matthew Wood, who is the agent. Again, can we get you online?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Right, you have 2 minutes from when you begin to speak. Thank you. Off you go.
Thank you very much. Good evening to members. As officers have highlighted, the applicant seeks full planning permission for the conversion of the existing commercial barn into office use. The external appearance of the building will remain to reflect its traditional appearance and rural location. Aesthetically, it is proposed to utilise as many existing openings as possible for windows and doors, with the addition of new openings to allow for better natural daylight into the building. The size, scale and height of the building will remain the same. The applicant submitted and paid for a pre-application meeting with officers to discuss the design and appearance. However, no meeting or response was ever produced despite repeated chasing for this. The applicant has recently planted new hedgerow along the northern boundary, consisting of 70 new hedge plants and 10 new established trees consisting of silver birch and field maple. The additional planting will also result in net gains in biodiversity, thereby improving the environmental qualities of the site. It is submitted that all existing and new vegetation along the boundaries of the site provide appropriate natural screening. The boundaries will therefore provide substantial containment and concealment of the site and reduce the prominence of any built form outside its immediate boundaries. It is also submitted that the proposed development would not be harmful to the character and appearance of the landscape or local countryside or result in urbanisation. The provision and change of use of the building will also help to support and enhance the vitality and viability of existing local services and facilities and provide local employment needs as strongly supported by the NPPF. The applicant also wishes to inform members that they already have 2 companies seriously interested in using these offices. The application was formally consulted on with all statutory consultees confirming that they have no objection to the proposals, with officers also confirming the acceptability of the proposals in relation to neighbouring amenity considerations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was perfect timing. Right, first job is to put the recommendation, which is for refusal, on the table. Will somebody second that, please?
I'll second that, Chairman.
All right, Councillor Jarvis was first. Right, Councillor Durham did in fact call this in, but we're aware he had to go away. We'd have been going some to get this to this point by 7 o'clock anyway, although I wish we had. So Councillor Jarvis, you're the other ward member. I hope you can, are you able to give us Councillor Durham's point of view as well as your own? Sorry.
I can do. I think Councillor Durham's point of view was purely with reference to the employment point. I think that is noted on the paperwork. I can't really comment more on than that. That was why he called it in. From my own point of view, I could only echo the eloquent words of Mr. Goff that you just heard. I mean, I've looked at the application. I think the officers have got this one right, and I think the reasons for refusal stand. This is a quiet country lane, and this really would be a significant urbanisation of the site if it was used for offices. The amount of car trips that would then go up and down that lane would change the very nature of what's currently in place. That's all I'll say at the moment, Chairman. I think I'll listen to other councillors. I'm happy to second the proposal. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor White, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, I've looked at this, and like every application, I determine them on their merits. And I actually disagree with the officers, and I think the benefits outweigh the harm. For me, it's an employment site. It's only light office use, and we desperately need employment. We desperately need business rates, and that absolutely accords with our local development plan. Unlike the previous application, there will actually be an improvement in the air quality and pollution and nuisance, because there'll be no manure smells, no noise, no horses kicking doors at 2 o'clock in the morning. I actually think there'll be less traffic than stables, and it won't be antisocial hours, because obviously everyone knows with horses you have to be there day and night. And I actually think there will be an improvement on the effect on the countryside, and I think it will actually help the neighbours, because there'll be more screening than there currently is, and they're going to replace, was it a tin roof with tiles, and there's no change to the absolute building. So I think that the benefits far outweigh the harm, and I think this does accord with our local development plan, and I'm sorry I come to a completely contrary decision to the applicants, to the officers.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Siddle. Oh, sorry, Councillor Keys. I should have put Councillor Keys in first. You're higher on my list. Apologies, Councillor Siddle. Councillor Keys, please.
That's not a problem. Councillor Siddle could have gone first if he requires, but I've not got too much to say.
You've started now, so
I've started, right. Have we got the hours? Can we put a stipulation on hours, or is there an hour stipulation in there at present? I couldn't see one. Is it 7 till 4 or 7 till 5? I don't know.
I'm sure we could if we ended up approving it, but as it's for a refusal, that kind of thing just isn't addressed here. But we would if we got to that.
We could if we needed to.
Okay,
well, all right. Yeah, okay, that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Siddle, please, then.
Thank you, Chairman. I am in agreement with the officers. This is an inappropriate location for a business site. It's not the right place to develop something like this, and the officers have got this right, and I agree with the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Morley, I've got you next on my list.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to see, is there a map we could see of the access into the site, please? Again. No. Obviously not. Okay. It was just access.
Do we have any details on the access, please, Ms. Bowles?
Yeah, through you, Chair. I'll just pull the.
I've lost you.
I can look on my map, don't worry.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Do come back if you need more information. Right, Councillor Fleming. Oh, here we go. It's there now.
Oh, yeah. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Right, I've got Councillor Fleming, but I do have a quick question. I can't find it, and just for clarity, is this to replace all the equestrian use or only some of it? Will it be mixed? That's a question for the case officer, I think, please.
Yeah. It will be just an office use, the site.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Fleming. Off you go, please. Councillor Fleming?
You're on mute, Jane.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that I think the officers on balance have this right. I know Rectory Lane, it's a very quiet, that particular spot is very rural, very inaccessible, so I think they have this right. Thank you.
Thank you. I must admit I'm somewhat concerned myself. You know, you have to fulfill all the policies, not just some of them. At least that's the theory. And I think it's possible this will come back with more information, but for now I'm certainly not happy to approve it. So I have no more hands. I have put the recommendation duly seconded that this should be refused for the reasons as detailed. So Katie, could you please take a vote?
Yes, Chairman. So we are voting to refuse the application as per the officer's recommendation.
Absolutely.
Members, I'll take your name in alphabetical order, starting with Councillor Mrs. Fleming.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Miss White.
Against.
Chairman, that is 6 for and 1 against.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, members. So that is refused in line with the officer's recommendation. So we now have 8 on our agenda. The next planning application is for 70 Colchester Road, Great Totham. So Miss Bowles, could we have the report, please? I believe there are no further speakers. No, not public speakers. Okay, so report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So planning permission is sought for the construction of a new dwelling. We've got the location plan and the block plan, which shows the proposed dwelling, parking area and amenity space to the rear. The proposed elevations. And the proposed floor and roof plans. And we have some site photos. Please note the caravan is no longer on the site. This application is a resubmission following the refusal of a previous scheme. The reason for refusal related solely to the detrimental visual impact the appearance of the proposed dwelling, mainly caused by the fenestration scheme across the front elevation, would have caused. The amendments to the scheme are considered to have overcome the previous reason for refusal. In 2013, the application site was considered to be a sustainable location for residential development. Given that there have been no significant changes to the site or surrounding area that would alter the stance previously taken, no objections to the principle of the development are raised. It's considered that the proposal would have an acceptable visual impact on the site and character and appearance of the area, and no objections are raised to the impact of the development on residential amenity, car parking provision or amenity space. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I take it this is Totham Ward, is it, Councillor Siddle? Councillor Keys?
It certainly is.
It
Yes,
is.
it is.
Yeah, great, Totham North.
Right. Yeah, I was trying to work out exactly where it was. Since I've got you, Councillor Siddle, would you be happy to start us off?
Yes, so I'm happy to go along with the officer's recommendation in terms of this application. It makes sense in terms of its location, and as the officer says, it doesn't have any impact, and the new design is a great improvement on the previous one. So yeah, as the ward member, I'm happy to go with the officer's recommendation.
And as
Thank
another
you.
board member, I will second it.
Oh, that's simple. Councillor Morley.
Yes, I don't have a problem. I know where it is. It was just, where was the access going to be? Was it going to be down that little auxiliary, like an auxiliary road down the side, or I can't remember how the access was going to be to it. That was all.
It's off that old road. It's really with the old road, isn't it? So,
okay, so they're not.
Could we pop that one back up again?
Yeah, that's it. I can see. Yeah, that's fine. All right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the recommendation is to approve. I haven't heard anyone speak against it, so could we have the roll call, please?
can we do via assent, Chairman?
Well, we can, but it's just a bit awkward if anyone doesn't. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and in the chamber it would be so easy because everyone's hand goes up at once. So Katie, could we gallop through the roll call, please?
Yes, Chairman. So we are voting to approve the application as per the officer's recommendation. Councillor Mrs. Fleming, please.
For. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
For, Katie.
Councillor Jarvis. Thank you. Sorry. Councillor Keys.
For, Katie.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
For. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miss White.
For.
Okay.
Thank you. Chairman, that was 7 for and none against. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So that is approved in line with the officer's report. So we're moving a little faster now. Item number 9 on our agenda is barns adjacent.
I'm off again.
You're off again. Okay. We'll have you back in afterwards. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Morley. Barns adjacent to Mosklyns Farm, Chelmsford Road, Purleigh. Okay, Ms. Parker-Haynes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Planning permission is sought for the retention of the existing dwelling house. It should be noted that this dwelling house was permitted under the terms of the prior approval application 15-01096, which allowed the change of use of 2 barns from agricultural to residential. However, as set out in section 5.3 of the officer report, these works were not completed within the time frame or in accordance with the plans as approved, and therefore the use of this barn as a dwelling house is currently unlawful and does not benefit from formal consent. This is the location plan. It should be noted that this application relates solely to the completed and occupied single-storey dwelling to the east and includes the provision of a private footpath through the fields to the south to adjoin the formalised footpath on Chelmsford Road. This is the block plan. These are the floor plans and elevations of the dwelling. These are the elevations of the approved prior approval application. The alterations relate to the positioning of windows and doors. This is explained further in section 3.2.2 of the officer's report. And here are some photographs of the site. It should be noted that the site does not benefit from formal consent, and therefore there is no fallback position established by the expired prior approval application. This matter is thoroughly explained in section 5.1 of the officer's report. Furthermore, an application to regularise the development, including the barn to the west, was refused planning permission by the North Western Planning Committee on the 8th of June 2020. This application is recommended for refusal. It is not considered that the provision of a dwelling would be acceptable on this site due to the location and design of the dwelling and the detrimental impact this would have on the character and appearance of the site and surrounding countryside through the inherent domestication of the site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, we have no one to speak on this, no member of the public. The recommendation is that the application should be refused. Anyone prepared to second that?
I'll second it, only until we have the debate. And I would like.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I know people think it's strange that you can propose or second a thing and then vote against it, but you can. Councillor Fleming, was this one you were going to speak on or not? I noticed you called it in, so if you're going to speak, please do.
Yes, please, Chair. Could I just ask Hayley to bring up the location plan from her presentation? Thanks, Hayley. So the first point I'd like to make about the officer's comments in the conclusion 3.3.1, I might have agreed with their comments maybe 5-10 years ago, but living locally, I know this road really well. So I know that the sort of character of the area has changed significantly over the last 5 years because of developments across the road. If everyone can see, Rudley Oaks, Tree Lawn Nursery, Tye Meadows and Brook House have all been granted an appeal. I think from memory, maybe in 2016, 2019. Basically, the planning inspector disagreed and said that the location was sustainable and that it didn't have a detrimental impact on the area. So for that reason, yeah, I have concerns about the officer's recommendation. Also, talking about Purleigh, it is, the applicants have put in a permissive path which sort of takes you up to a stretch of footpath. So it is walkable now to services. Purleigh has an outstanding primary school, nursery, there's a pub, there's an award-winning community shop that's open 7 days a week and they deliver. So yeah, I think that the officers probably have it wrong on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White, I have you top of my list.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, as I've said before, I judge every application that comes before me on its merits on the evening it comes before, and I objected to this one the last time it came before us because the garden didn't comply with the garden size regulations at the time, and they've obviously addressed that because that isn't a reason anymore. And in relation to the other applications that my fellow ward member mentions, further around the corner, Sunnycott also got approved at appeal, and as did an application between what used to be the Queen's Head and Gardeners Cottage, I don't know what it's called now, just by Spar Lane there. So lots of them have been through to say it's sustainable. Like the first application today, I thought that had no issues with it. I have absolutely no issues with this one, and I'd like to propose that we approve this application as I think the benefit outweighs the harm. It will help with our 5-year land supply, and it now complies with the garden size, which I had a problem with last time. So I've got no problems with it this time. And as I say, I make my decision every time. I objected last time. I'm more in mind to approve this time because it's a different. They've made changes that I agree with.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Keys is my last speaker at the moment. Councillor Keys, please.
Good evening. am I correct? They said it's just the planning has lapsed. Was that what I heard?
Yes, Mr.
How
Lee.
long
Or...
has it been lapsed?
Through you, Chairman.
Please.
There's a couple of points I'd like to come back on and deal with it as a whole. As Ms. Park-Haynes explained when doing the presentation, this application, or a subject, this application was half of a planning application that relatively recently the Northwest Planning Committee refused on location, on sustainability. And as always, I will highlight that, the starting point for a termination application must be the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And as always, I'll echo that planning history on a site is a material consideration of significant weight. Obviously, the amenity space has changed. In relation to the access to the site, the proposal now includes a footpath on their own land, for want of a better phrase, to try and access Purleigh. But obviously, this would be down a totally dark, unlit area, which obviously is something that officers, as we don't support, and something that has something, an approach that I would think, very unlikely to be supported at appeal, because it would not be something that is likely to be embraced by a future occupier, particularly at times of inclement weather or darkness. In relation to Councillor Keyes's point, it's not that a planning permission has lapsed. What they got was a prior approval process which doesn't look into things like sustainability and access to facilities and everything. That permission was granted in 2015 and needed to be undertaken by 2018 to be able to be implemented and to be usable. That has fallen away nearly 3 years ago now. So that permission isn't a case that they got planning permission and now that's expired. It was a totally different permission through a different set of considerations and planning policies, for want of a better phrase. So it's a bit of a moot point to a certain extent. But I think, as Ms. Park-Haynes explained, that is very, very robustly and detailed assessed within the officer's report, and I won't repeat that now.
Thank you. Councillor Keyes, did you have some more to say? Is that yes? No, did that answer your question?
Well, it did, but I didn't finish what I was going to. As I've come back on, I've just heard no street lights. Well, I've managed to get about my place for, I'll tell you how old I am now, 48 years with a torch. We live in the countryside. We don't want street lights. I've had this on many occasions. So, yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't think I agree with that. And also, I would second Mrs. White's proposal.
Okay, well, we haven't got there yet because we have a recommendation on the table. Right, the next person I've got who hasn't spoken is Councillor Siddle, and then I will give you other two a second go, especially as your ward members.
Thank you,
Councillor Siddle, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I would just like to back up what Councillor Keyes has just said. If I look out on my window now, it is pitch black and I have no street lights, but I can quite happily live here and cope with living here with no street lights and no pavement. So, people are able to do that.
Okay.
Chairman, can I just once again echo members can be very conscious of what is said and the reasoning behind granting planning permission, because statements like that are basically saying that we can allow housing anywhere in the district, and it's contrary to appealed decisions, contrary to government guidance, contrary to PPF. But lots of these statements that are being made are going to be making it very hard for officers to resist development through the district. That's all I'd like to say, because these will be used against us.
They absolutely will. I mean, I live in the middle of nowhere with no footpath and no lighting, and it was a replacement dwelling, and there's no way we'd get permission for a new one here now, or even would have 60 odd years ago. Right, I have Councillor White and Councillor Fleming want to come back. Councillor White's higher up my list, so you go first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, it's just to say that actually the reason I was one of the members who refused it last time, and the reason I refused it was the amenity space. And that's been addressed. We also now do not have a 5-year land supply, which we did have the last time the application came behind us. And I think that it would be absolutely ridiculous to have a fully converted building that people are living in and then removing it when we don't have a 5-year land supply. And I honestly think that the benefits outweigh the harm yet again. And it's not, as I say, I refused it last time, but this time I approve it because the application has changed and I'm deciding it on its merits. Thank you.
Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out to committee members that this is actually a working farm and the application is from the farmers. It's for their family. It's a livestock farm. So it's housing the family. So it's not in conflict with the NPPF. In fact, I think that it's fully compliant with paragraph 78. To promote sustainable development in rural areas, housing should be located where it will enhance and maintain the vitality of rural communities. They work in the community. Mosklyns Farm is one of the last dairy farms in Essex. So I think that to approve this application would be totally in line with policy. It is in a sustainable, accessible location, and because of the developments allowed on appeal, in very close proximity, I feel that it does comply with policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I ran out of hands, so I think we'd better vote. Oh no, Councillor Lee, dearie me. Mr. Lee, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points on sort of some of the points that have been in debate. Obviously, if this is granted, obviously we'll need a reason for approval. So I just want to comment on a couple of points. Firstly, the fact that the application is for people that live in the village, using the village, it's family, etc., is something that has been found to be an illegal reason for granting planning permission previously. It's not, planning sits with the land. It is not about who the applicant is or how they personally might use the site or relate to the site, because that is not a material consideration and has been found to be to be honest, a cult council committee was very heavily reprimanded, I'll leave it at that, for actually doing those exact decisions. So I'll flag members up to be very conscious of wording what they use. Secondly, my advice would be if this applicant is suggesting, which they haven't, that this is a dwelling that is particularly needed for the viability of the business, it should be submitted as an agricultural workers dwelling, not as an independent dwelling that in theory could be sold and could be occupied totally separate to an existing farm. So for that would be one of the reasons why we wouldn't be able to give some of the points that Councillor Flem was really any weight in my advice when coming to a decision. And I can't remember what the third point was, and I've just typed the word nothing, so it's not really going to help me in coming back on the point. So right, so actually that's jogged my mind. All I'd say is that members need to be very conscious of the previous appeal decision. I mean, not appeal decision by the committee. And I do acknowledge Councillor White's point about amenity space, but the application was determined by the council on all of the reasons of refusal, not on just one. So although one of them may well have fallen away, I do not consider that the one in relation to sustainability and location has. I just think members need to be very conscious of that when coming to determination of this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Fleming, is that a new hand or a legacy hand? New hand.
Yes, new hand. I just wanted to ask Mr. Lee about the appeals history across the road. Whether I'm correct in thinking that is a material consideration. The fact that the inspector, I think there's about 5 properties across the road where the inspector has said that there's no harm to the rural character, that the character had changed over time, and the fact that they were sustainable locations. Is that a material consideration for us, Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. To a certain extent, an appeal decision would be, but what I would highlight is that they were still material considerations at the termination of the last application. So those the most recent application would carry more weight, in my advice to members, than previous appeal decisions. And that section, or there's a section within the office report in 5.7.5 which deals with that matter and highlights the differences between the previous permissions and the current submission. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, well, we do have the officer's recommendation to refuse to put first, so we'll do that. But I must admit that approving this looks to me like an open invitation to have people get whatever kind of permission, let it run out, then build something that wasn't on the plan, and then get it agreed later. I'm sorry,
Chairman,
members, it grinds my gears.
Yeah. One other point, sorry, Chairman, is that just in relation to if this is approved, and obviously part of the debate, one of the issues that was raised that this is an existing building being used for habitable permission. I would advise that members do not give any weight to development without planning permission being occupied as a material consideration, because that would then, in theory, encourage people to convert buildings without planning permission into residential accommodation, and then argue that the council considers that because we have no 5-year land supply and inappropriate, it wouldn't be appropriate to remove that residential use, because obviously that was sort of basically a summary of what the wording is. So obviously, if this is approved, I just advise them to be very, very careful of the wording for why it's been approved and why the recommendation is not being agreed.
Because it's actually being lived in without permission. Because it's being lived in without any permission.
That would then encourage, in theory, in my opinion, anybody to do it. Yep, thank you, Chair.
Right. All right, Councillor Miss White. Right, very, very quick, and then we've got to go.
Thank you. Just briefly, just to say the application has changed. It is different to the previous application, and the layout and some of the other items are different. Therefore, I have come to a different view this time. That is what I can do as a member, and I'm finding it very strange that I have to make the same decision every time. On balance, because they've changed the issues I had a problem with, and there have been lots and lots of appeal approvals along that road. It's not one. They said there's lots and lots of them. That is why I don't have a problem. The inspector says it's a sustainable location. I think it's a sustainable location, and they've sorted out the garden space. And I've come to a different decision because it's a different application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to put the recommendation. Katie, please, quick, super quick roll call. So we're voting on a. Sorry.
That's fine. We're voting to refuse the application as per the officer's recommendation. Councillor Mrs. Fleming.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis. Councillor Jarvis.
Councillor Jarvis.
Apologies, Chairman. I was on mute. Against.
Okay.
Councillor Keys.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Miss White.
Against.
Thank you, Chairman. That is 1 for and 5 against.
Okay, thank you. So now I need a proposal, presumably to approve with reasons that A, address the reasons for refusal in the report, and B, please don't say someone's already living there. Okay, so who's going to give me that proposal?
Do you want me to go, Chair?
Sure, you go ahead. Let's have
so taking the officer's wording, we could say it is considered that the provision of a dwelling would be acceptable on the site, and the location design of the proposed dwelling would not have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding countryside. Is that good enough?
I'm not the planner.
Mr.
Lee, does that cover the requirements?
Obviously,
Sorry,
it's
Mr.
not
Lee.
normally acceptable just to just obviously try and basically say whatever the officer said was the harm is not the harm, particularly taking into account with this one, there was a previous decision by this committee that said the location wasn't acceptable for a dwelling. And that's my biggest, I do try to help members as much as I can, but it's very difficult when the council has made the decision that is totally contrary to, or, previous decision is consistent with the recommendation. When that recommendation is gone against, it's very difficult for me to provide members advice and help as to why you can go against our recommendation. I do try to assist members, but you know, we need to, as a decision maker, evidence what has materially altered between this and the previous decision. And one of the concerns and reason for refusal was location. I acknowledge Councillor White's point about the certain aspects have changed, such as amenity sites, but that reason for refusal has fallen away. The fact that this has been determined by the council, by this committee even relatively recently, that it was an inappropriate location means there really needs to be something aimed at that is put forward as part of the reason for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, ball's in your court, Councillor Fleming.
So how about the development would make a positive contribution in terms of social, economic sustainability and is acceptable in the context of national and local planning policies, particularly in relation to the fact that this is a different application. There's now a footpath, which means that the footway at Spa Lane can now be accessed, so the site is accessible. Mr. Lee?
Okay.
I don't think we could go as far as saying it was compliant with policy and national guidance, but if members consider that that footpath now means that it's becomes an acceptable and sustainable location, then obviously that's within their gift to do so. I can just see a lot of footpaths in darkness being put forward, and
yeah,
you know, this is the difficult position. You know, every applicant has a right to be treated exactly the same. So every decision we make as a committee, which chips away at our policies of our requirements for, like previous with the, I know members agreed the previous application, but that's an example where there's like 5 criteria in that employment policy and certain ones were not met. You know, if we start to say that they don't matter, every applicant has a right not to submit that information. And, you know, decisions like this, if this is granted, we're going to say footpaths that have no light, no safe use. And I know members are saying that they live like that, but that is not what the policies require. That is not what government guidance expects. So, you know, we'll make decisions difficult for officers, and I think we'll start, you know, that's just where we are. Thank you, Chairman.
Matt, could we say then that the development wouldn't have just a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding countryside?
Through you, Chairman, it's a very difficult situation because we've only recently said that there was all this harm because it was only determined 6 months ago. And you've really got to talk about what the difference is. I know Councillor White's highlighted the lack of a 5-year land supply, and obviously that is a difference. And so automatically being outside the fact that it's automatically outside the
settlement boundary?
Outside the settlement boundary is no longer a reason for refusal. You know, obviously, if members, though, consider on balance that the provision of this footpath has made the site acceptable, you know, I know Councillor Keys raised the fact there was a previous permission, so that is a, you know, a material consideration of some way, and on balance, overall, you know, it has made it materially different to previous application, taking on the various points of debate. You know, that would have some merit, but a lot of what you've got, I'd be advising members is to look at the differences between the previous permission and this, and saying why they've overcome the reasons that go to the core, because a lot of the other points, there's no real difference. And we can't, as in legally, we cannot just say, oh, we said this 5 minutes ago, we don't agree with it now. And that's just a point of law. You know, I just advise members, we can't be doing that, because if anyone did choose to JR one of our decisions, we would lose. So my advice is to members to look at the differences, and as Councillor White said, there is now no longer a 5-year land supply, and you know, and if members think that that footpath, as Councillor Keys said, is acceptable, then, and if members think that the fact that there was a prior approval that's fallen away is a material consideration, that's within their gift. Thank you, Chairman.
There you go, Councillor Fleming. Councillor Councillor White, were you going to make a suggestion or?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that we approve the application because on the balance of probability, the material consideration is we do not now have a 5-year land supply, so that's a change since the last time the application came before us. The applicants have addressed the issue regarding the amenity space because the garden did not meet the required size. And also we've had recent appeal decisions that have approved locations at dwelling houses and found that the location is sustainable along the main road in Purleigh.
I would advise members didn't use the last point.
They predate the last decision, yeah.
Yes, I wouldn't advise members use that last point because any recent appeal decision is
okay. That's fine.
Said.
Well, I just think then the 5-year land supply is a material consideration, and the applicants have addressed the garden space not meeting the Malden LDP housing guidelines or whatever they're called.
Okay,
I'll second that.
Are you all right with that? Okay.
Yeah.
Then we need a vote, please, Katie.
Of course, thank you, Chairman. So we are voting to approve the application contrary to the officer's recommendation.
We're going to need conditions, by the way. Sorry, but Katie, carry on.
Councillor Mrs Fleming.
4. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
4. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. The Keys.
4. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Against, sorry.
Thank you. And Councillor Miss White.
4.
Thank you. Chairman, that is 5 for and 1 against.
Okay, thank you. Can we leave conditions to be delegated to officers and chairman and ward members?
I would recommend that, yeah, Chairman.
Is that's the correct approach, is it, Mr. Lee? Okay. So does anyone disagree with that?
Chairman, off the cuff, I'm not sure what conditions we'd impose, so I would recommend that, rather than missing anything, especially taking into account it's retrospective, I wouldn't want to recommend we put in any conditions that aren't necessary either. So
no.
I'll just.
Yeah, okay. No, I'd far rather we do that unless anyone violently objects or has anything to say. Oh, Mr. Lawrence.
I just make the point, Chair, to you that there would be a Section 106 agreement required to secure the contribution under the habitat regulations.
Ah, yes.
Sorry. So in this instance, I think the applicant's already submitted that.
We've got that.
Ms. Parkane, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say they have already submitted the unilateral undertaking, so that's all been checked and agreed. So that's
okay. Perfect. Thank you. Right. So we've agreed that we're going to sort out the conditions between me and particularly the ward members, although of course the building's already there. Right, now, item 10, the last one, we have... Oh, can someone get Councillor Morley back if he's coming? We will be looking at confirming or not a tree preservation order on the Pines, Franklin Road, North Fambridge. And I know it's not going to be Sophie Marden, but it is going to be Anna? Right, can we just hold off until we get Councillor Morley back, please? Just give him a couple of minutes. Just out of interest, Katie, how do we get someone back who's left?
We will click on him in part of the attendees. You can click on him and invite him to join. He's being called at the moment.
Excellent, thank you. Sorry about the gap, but we've already lost Councillor Durham earlier, so let's have him. Let's have him back. He's entitled to his say.
Hello, I'm back.
He's
wonderful. Back. Thank you, Councillor. Right, off we go. TPO.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this item relates to the confirmation of TPO 10/20. In July 2020, the council received an inquiry from a customer who wanted to fell the Leylandii tree, which is situated within the front garden of the Pines, as you can see here. Due to the prominent location and size, it was considered that the removal of the tree would materially impact the amenity of the area. A tree evaluation method for preservation orders was carried out, and the tree scored 15 out of 25 and concluded it was worthy of a tree preservation order. The resulting TPO was served on the 23rd of July 2020. One objection has been received from a neighbouring occupier. The neighbour does not believe the Leylandii tree is worthy of a TPO due to a number of reasons, including the poor condition of the tree, the light obstruction and the obstruction of views from traffic. The neighbour highlights the debris from the tree, including bird mess, falls onto neighbouring lawns, driveways and cars, and the power line running through the tree looks to be damaged by the growth and movement. The objections from the neighbour have not been resolved as the tree does not appear to be in poor health, no evidence of damage to the power lines has been provided, and the issue of falling debris and bird mess is not considered to be a justified reason for the removal of the tree. Therefore, the question of whether or not to confirm the TPO has been brought to the members to decide. Here we've got the photos of the Leylandii looking west and looking east. Due to its location, the size of the tree and the lack of other substantial trees in the immediate area, it is considered that the tree provides significant amenity value to the character and appearance of the area, and the TPO should be confirmed to prevent the inappropriate works being carried out which could harm the amenity value and health of the tree. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, Councillor White, you had your hand up in a nanosecond. Off you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could the officers tell me what the score on Part B was on the tempo system? Because Part B says you have to allow for trees which are existing or near future nuisance, including those clearly outgrowing their context, or which are significantly negating the potential of other trees. Because let's make no mistake, this isn't a field. This isn't a farm, this isn't a track, this is somebody's front garden. And everybody knows that you can't get a mortgage on a house if they have a big Leylandii tree within 20 metres of their dwelling, because the roots grow under all the houses. And particularly with the ground heave that happens in North Fambridge, this is, yeah, it's a nice enough tree, but it's a Leylandii. It's just in absolutely the wrong location. I think it's dangerous because if it does blow over, which Leylandis do, that is going to flatten somebody's house either side of the road. And as I say, I'm curious to see how the officers have decided that it's not outgrowing their contents and it's not either existing or a near future nuisance, because that is ridiculous. Plus, you can see lots of power cables and telephone cables and goodness knows what else. And I say it's just a nice enough Leylandii tree, but it's a Leylandii and it is in absolutely the wrong location. So how did they give it a high enough score on Part B?
Chairman, my understanding the score was 2, but what I'd also like to highlight is the fact that, you know, it's very much a common practice to serve TPOs on properties, trees in people's gardens. You know, I know as a district we're probably much more used to experiencing them in fields and hedgerows, but as I can guarantee from my experience at previous authorities, which are much more urban than Malden, that it's a very common practice and it's something that we, you know, regularly able to defend and appeal. I'm sure Mr. Johnson's experience at London, etc., will have still dealt with TPOs and still been in quite urban areas. So it's about management, and it doesn't automatically mean that it's unacceptable. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, right. I've got Councillor Siddle next.
Thank you, Chairman. I am completely against the recommendation to put a TPO on this. Leylandii tree, by its nature, has no benefit in terms of the quality of that tree. They are dangerous trees. one of the things about them, and the reason why they do fall over, so Councillor White is correct that they do fall over, they actually have very shallow roots, and that's why they fall over so easily. So therefore, in terms of that particular tree and its location and its situation, it's in an absolutely appalling place, and therefore should, my view is it should be removed, because it's not benefiting the street in any way. Landii trees, people now avoid them because they are such a nuisance. So in terms of putting a TPO on it, I totally disagree, and and I don't think it should happen.
Thank you. Councillor White, I will go through the people who haven't spoken yet. So Councillor Jarvis is next, then Councillors Fleming and Morley.
I just wanted to echo some of those comments. I mean, we all know Landii trees are probably the worst valued tree that there is. They were very popular because they grew quickly. That's why people had them. So in terms of value of tree, type of tree, this is not a native tree. It's one of the least attractive trees in terms of preserving an individual tree, no matter what size. This particular one, I mean, I'm amazed that a tree that large near those properties. As we all know, if we're looking for any sort of development, you've got to have the tree a long way away from the house. That is just in the wrong place. And as for those lines, I'm sure if that was reported, they would come and want to trim that tree, because those lines, those electric lines above, they shouldn't be anywhere near the tree. So I could see there being a lot of justification for somebody insisting on taking the tree down. So for somebody, I'm very surprised that officers are recommending a TPO. That seems quite extraordinary. So I'm just really supporting some of the comments that Councillor White, Councillor Siddle have made. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. Who knew that Councillor Siddle was such a tree expert? Yes, I agree. I find it slightly odd that we're proposing a TPO on a Leylandii. They're very damaging to the structure of buildings. So yeah, I have concerns about the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Morley.
Yes, just to agree with the other councillors. The thing is, though, once you start to chop the tree about to make way for the power line, it's going to look an eyesore anyway, even more than it does now. It's growing so fast, they'll be chopping a V shape in it forever and a day. So cannot understand why they're preserving a tree like that. Thank you.
Councillor Miss White, anything to add?
Well, just to come back, although I have some sympathy for the officers, we're not urban, and we're not London. We have lots of nice trees. We don't need such a big Leylandii right in somebody's front garden. It's just not the right location. And the tempo form does allow that, or makes provision for that. So it really shouldn't have scored such a high score anyway, in my opinion. So I think this should not be confirmed.
Okay, actually, I think once again my mouth took over and I didn't put the recommendation. So the recommendation is that the TPO be confirmed. Anybody second that?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay. Right, quick vote. Rapid fire vote, please, Katie.
Yes, Chairman, so that we are
sorry.
voting.
Clive, could you mute, please? Sorry.
Oh, beg your pardon.
We are voting to confirm the tree preservation order. Starting with Councillor Mrs. Fleming, please.
Against. Thank you, Katie.
Councillor Jarvis, please.
Against, please, Katie.
Councillor Keys.
Against, please, Katie.
Councillor Morley.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
It's the Leylandii. I'm going to abstain. I'm not quite sure.
Thank you. Councillor Miss White.
Against.
Thank you. Chairman, that is none for, 6 against and 1 abstention.
Okay, right. As this is a TPO and I know the rules are a bit different, Mr. Lee, do we have to vote the opposite way, or is that a done deal now?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. If I'm correct, it's a done deal because it's about whether we confirm it or not. It's not about, so by not confirming it, it's automatically, yeah.
Not confirmed.
Yes,
Are you
so
sure
it's
we're
not
right?
confirmed.
Because I'll do the other vote if it saves
No,
us from getting into trouble.
I am 95% convinced. If you want to run the other vote just to be belt and braces, but I'm 90. I don't think we've ever done it before.
I think I'd rather look a little bit silly than make a mess of it. So all right, I'm going to put the proposal, even though I was the only one that didn't support it, that the tree preservation order not be confirmed. Seconder, please.
Yeah, I'll second.
Second that.
Okay, right. Sue, Councillor White was the first one I actually heard. So again, rapid fire vote, please, on not confirming the TPO, please, Katie.
Yes, Chairman. So we're voting not to confirm the TPO, starting with Councillor Mrs. Fleming, please.
4. Thank you, Katie.
Councillor Jarvis.
4, please, Katie.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
4, please, Katie.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
I'm still abstaining. I've still got very mixed views.
Thank you. And Councillor Miss White.
4.
Thank you. Chairman, that
Okay.
is 6 for, none against and 1 abstention.
So we're definitely not confirming. Okay, item 11. Any other items of business the chairman of the committee decides are urgent? There are none. Item 12 is the closure of the meeting. Members and officers, thank you all for your contributions this evening. I draw the meeting to a close at 2027, which at least is better than last month. As the meeting is now closed, members are advised not to enter into any further discussion on this forum and to please leave the meeting promptly. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
And good evening to Mr. Lawrence. It was nice to see him back again.